Your Excellency, Adam Barrow, President of the Republic of the Gambia, Honorable Speaker of the National Assembly, my Lord the Chief Justice, Cabinet colleagues, my Lords and Lady Justices of the Superior Courts, Honorable Members of the National Assembly, the Under-Secretary General for Legal Affairs and United Nations Legal Counsel, Miguel de Sapo Suarez, Special Representative of the Secretary General, Mohamed Ibn Chambers, Madam Prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, Fatou Bensouda, Assistant Secretary General for Peace Building, Oscar Fernandez Teranco, the Peace Building Chair, Ambassador Ginga, the Regional Representative of the High Commissioner for Human Rights in West Africa, Andrea Ori, members of the Diplomatic and Consular Corps, service chiefs, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. We are grateful to all of you for your presence here today. We are particularly grateful to His Excellency, the President. Your Excellency, your presence here today is yet another indication of your personal commitment to the process of peace and reconciliation in our country. Distinguished guests, ours was a country where fear ruled for over 2 decades, where mothers dreaded that midnight knock on their doors which took away their sons and husbands forever, where civil servants went to work every morning saying goodbye to their families as if it was the last time they would see them ever again, because coming back home to them was never a certainty, where unarmed school children were gunned down in broad daylight, where torture was routine, where women under detention were sexually molested and where sexual assault was used as a weapon to break and subjugate them, where summary executions and targeted murder were an option without consequences, and where ordinary citizens, you and I, speak of our leaders only in whispers within the 4 walls of our bedrooms. But the Gambian people had resolved that they had had enough of the killings, enough of the tortures, enough of the constant stream of new orphans and widows, and said no more. On 1st December 2016, we stood tall among nations and showed the world that the people yearning for freedom could rise from the ashes of tyranny and transition from dictatorship to democracy through the ballot box. We are a living proof that it could be done. Your Excellency, distinguished guests, while the departure of the former president has clearly marked a significant turning point in the Gambia, he has left behind a legacy that included many of the factors or root causes of conflict. Decades of authoritarian rule characterized by gross human rights violations, including torture, enforced disappearance, arbitrary arrest, detention without trial, and murder perpetrated by state agents. A deeply polarized society based on ethnic and political considerations, ethnic hatred manifested through hateful propaganda targeted at certain ethnic communities, political persecution, impunity for crimes committed, and of course, poverty. Consequently, the period immediately following the former president's departure exposed the new government to its first and most pressing challenge, sustaining the peace in the country amidst a real risk of intercommunal clashes motivated by ethnic and political considerations that had simmered beneath the facade of peaceful coexistence for over 2 decades. This requires reassuring all sides of the ethnic and political divide that there shall be no witch hunt against any person or communities for the excesses of the previous regime, while at the same time reassuring victims and their families that justice will be dispensed through due process of law, respect for the rights of all Gambians, and in a fair, transparent, and stable environment. A balance, indeed, between, on the one hand, fostering social cohesion and encouraging national reconciliation through justice, and on the other hand, the rebuilding of a strong and robust democratic foundation anchored upon respect for the rule of law and human rights. In this regard, and over the long term, the government has resolved to improve the country's constitutional, legal, and institutional framework in various governance areas in order to consolidate democracy and align the entire governance architecture with international justice and human rights standards. The priority of this government is to put in place a new and resilient architecture to uphold the highest standards when it comes to human rights, justice, and the rule of law. This means embarking on an ambitious legal and constitutional reform process, focusing primarily on the 5 following areas: a constitutional review, institutional reform, criminal justice and media law reform, truth-seeking, reconciliation and reparations, and of course, addressing impunity. In embarking on these reform processes, we have adopted a new governance culture in which public consultations and inclusiveness play an integral part. This is born out of the strong conviction that by giving the people ownership of these processes, they are more likely to accept the outcome. In the case of the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Commission, public participation at every stage of the process engendered greater legitimacy. The consultations for the establishment of the TRRC were led by myself and included representatives from civil society organizations, victims groups, women's groups, youth groups, professional associations, etc. We traveled around the country and held public consultations with key stakeholders in the communities. The idea of a Truth Commission received universal support from political, ethnic, and religious communities across the country, culminating in the unanimous enactment by the National Assembly of the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Commission Act 2017. The views and opinions expressed by communities during these consultations informed several key peculiar aspects of our TRRC process. Your Excellency, distinguished guests, with the victims at the center of our efforts, the primary objectives of the TRRC include to investigate human rights violations and abuses committed during the past 22 years of the former president's authoritarian rule, to foster social cohesion and encourage national reconciliation among Gambians, to address impunity, to recognize the rights and dignity of victims through the provision of appropriate reparations, and above all, to learn appropriate lessons in order to put in place effective mechanisms to prevent recurrence. Your Excellency, distinguished guests, the road to this launching event was long and challenging. The parallel and elaborate selection processes for the commissioners, the establishment of the regional selection panels, the public consultations and engagements at all levels, the direct involvement of thousands of Gambians in the selection process, the partnership with civil society and victims' representatives, the training of over 50 media personnel, the nomination of 133 candidates from across the country, the public calls for objections, and the final appointment of the 11 ordinary men and women who have now been entrusted to preside over and facilitate reconciliation between victims and perpetrators. They include representatives from all 7 administrative regions of the country and the diaspora, from all 5 majority ethnic groups in the country, from the 2 main religious denominations, from the National Youth Council, and 4 women, including the deputy chairperson. Their task is arduous, but no doubt noble. I thank them for accepting this huge responsibility, and I have no doubt that they will fully meet our expectations. I wish to thank in particular the chairperson, Dr. Lamin J. Sisi, an illustrious son of this country who has accepted to come back home and to give back to his country. Indeed, our country may be small and our country may be poor, but our country is blessed with the most fundamental resource, its sons and daughters. Your Excellency, distinguished guests, today therefore marks the beginning of a process that will demonstrate to the world that we are capable of reconciliation as a nation, and that our conduct during and after the 2016 elections is a true reflection of our national character as a peace-loving and progressive people. A day like today gives us an opportunity to reflect further on the very sober words of our national anthem, that for the Gambia, our homeland, we strive and work and pray, that all may live in unity, freedom, and peace each day. Let justice guide our actions towards the common good, and join our diverse peoples to prove man's brotherhood. Your Excellency, distinguished guests, today also marks the beginning of a process that will show the world that the Gambia will not condone impunity for the most serious human rights violations and abuses. That is why the TRRC is not only mandated to recommend amnesty or grant reparations, but also to identify for prosecution only those who bear the greatest responsibility for these violations and abuses. This focus results from the reality that the prosecution of those generally considered the most culpable is likely to have the greatest symbolic value and will provide the greatest sense of justice for the largest number of victims. But like in all democratic societies, we cannot agree on everything. There will always be divergent views. Our young democracy will be tested again and again, for that is what will make it resilient. We must therefore regard the emergence of divergent views not as failure, but as a proud mark of our maturing democracy. Let us not forget that less than 2 years ago, there were thousands of us fleeing across the border to neighboring countries to escape a potential outbreak of violent conflict that was both real and imminent. Therefore, peace and stability must come first above all other considerations. But we are also aware that true peace, as Martin Luther King said, is not merely the absence of tension, but the presence of justice. And justice can, of course, mean different things to different victims. Some demand retributive justice. Others want restorative justice. Yet other victims are content with only recognition of their victimhood by their tormentors. The process we are engaged in is therefore aimed at catering for all categories of victims in this country. Your Excellency, distinguished guests, what happened in the Gambia in December 2016 can no doubt inspire millions of others who yearn for freedom and democracy around the world. But we also cannot afford to be complacent. Removing the former president from power, impossible as it seemed at times, may prove to be an easier task compared to the challenges that lie ahead of us as a nation. But we have made a clear choice. We have chosen liberty over tyranny, democracy over dictatorship, and reconciliation over revenge. The road to sustainable peace and democracy in the Gambia will be a long and bumpy ride, but we shall not fail. Indeed, we will not fail. We will persist and we will persevere. With every falter and every stumble, for there shall be many along the way to that promised land of freedom and justice, which we all dreamed about on 1st December 2016, we shall lift ourselves up again and again, more determined than ever before to see that dream come true. Too many have died for this dream, and they shall not have died in vain. We must therefore view the New Gambia as a project for laying a solid foundation of democracy anchored upon respect for the rule of law, human rights, and constitutional authority. These are not just lofty ideals for us here in the Gambia. They are powerful ideas that carry great meaning for our people. Ideas that could have prevented the deaths of school children on April 10 and 11, 2000, of Basiru Bao, Dot Fall, Jibril Singh, Koro Sise, Daba Marina, Haruna Jame, Sol Ndaw, Mahawa Cham, Mahmoud Sise, Solo Sandeng, and many others, and the gruesome torture of many more. These ideals can save lives. The New Gambia is therefore about the kind of legacy this generation of Gambians will bequeath to future generations of Gambians. In establishing the TRRC, we have been inspired by the wise words of Nelson Mandela at the end of apartheid in South Africa, that instead of hatred and revenge, we chose reconciliation and nation building. I therefore call upon the victims, and especially the perpetrators, to take advantage of this unique opportunity to come forward and help us heal the wounds of a battered and bruised nation. Every generation has been tested. This is the challenge of our generation. Your Excellency, distinguished guests, I cannot conclude without thanking you, Your Excellency, for your constant support and strong commitment to our transitional justice process and for the establishment of the TRRC. I would also like to thank some of our main partners, the United Nations Peacebuilding Support Office and the Peacebuilding Commission, for their tremendous and continuous support to our TJ process, to the UNDP Country Office staff members, to the UN Transitional Justice Project Management Unit team, to the Office of High Commissioner for Human Rights, UNICEF, the International Center for Transitional Justice, the International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance, Justice Rapid Response, the State of Qatar, the regional governors who coordinated the regional selection processes, and the regional selection panels that consulted with all 40 districts across the country to identify nominees for appointment as commissioners. And more importantly, special mention to my staff at the Ministry of Justice for their hard work, dedication, and commitment. To conclude, allow me to re-echo the words of Sekou Jammeh of the Gambia Press Union, my favorite quote, following the departure of the former president in January 2017. I believe his words capture the very essence of the dramatic political change that occurred in this country in December 2016. And he said this: "The sun is smiling on Gambia, not because Jammeh has gone or Barrow is coming, but because Gambia has decided that never again, indeed, never again." Thank you very much.